Have a wonderful subject, the subject for our study, the power of forgiveness. I know of no single consideration which the mind of man should attend greater than a study of the art of forgiveness, the power of forgiveness and what it can do in your life. What forgiveness can do to your body, your mind, your affairs. And the reason I state that an understanding of forgiveness is so necessary and vital is because really it was the main theme of all of the teachings of Jesus. But also you will find an understanding of it in the Old Testament as well as the New. Of all who ever lived, though, Jesus seemed to have an understanding, didn't he, of our frailties. He understood how so many can be hurt so easily by a word, a deed, an act. He knew why we have guilt and anxiety complexes too. But he also knew that anyone who was troubled in any way, whether it be physical, mental, or spiritual, an understanding of the principle of forgiveness would set them free from their burden. And you can use this principle this morning if you're burdened, if you're troubled. I say to anyone who is unhappy, who feels rejected, sick in mind and body, or who fears the future, consider well what it means to be forgiven and to forgive. Consider well what the future can mean. If you truly understand the principle I'm speaking of now, really is the kingdom of heaven here and now, not at a later time. Because you have great possibilities, every single one. Lord George Herbert wrote, "He who cannot forgive others breaks the bridge over which he must pass himself." And Henry Ward Beecher gave another consideration when he wrote, "I can forgive, but I cannot forget," is only another way of saying, I cannot forgive. My, how different we'd feel and how different we'd look. We could cast out all the memories, disappointments, and wrongs, mistakes. So never in the history of man was there ever one like Jesus who forgave so much. Not only did he forgive those who were close to him, as Peter who denied him, Judas who betrayed him, to those who nailed him to a cross. Just think of it, his love never wavered, it never deviated. And it wasn't a question, shall I forgive them? It was always, they are forgiven, for they know not what they do. Many men have interpreted Jesus to be such an idealistic man, weak, but in my opinion he was strong and vital, dynamic, but he was practical. He was the greatest of psychiatrists, greatest of all doctors of medicine, the greatest of counselors. No lawyer knew of the law as he knew of the law. No scribe knew of history as he knew history. No one knew the human mind or the human heart and knew about love as he did. But to him, forgiveness of the self and of others was the primary essential of life. Because to forgive and understand others is rightly using the creative law of spirit. It's using rightly the law of your mind that is constantly in action. See, everything in life that we do, whether it be a feeling, a thought, or an action, returns to us some effect in some manner. If we ourselves forgive, we are forgiven. And if we forgive ourselves first, they are forgiven. However, since such a principle is considered by many to be only a philosophic declaration, it wasn't to the Apostle Luke. For he was the one, as you know, who recorded the parable of the prodigal son. No others did. But to him it was important. Here was a boy who went to his father and said, look, give me what's mine. I want it. I know more than you. Some children think as they grow into maturity. His father said, all right, take it. And so he went, didn't he? The money was quickly gone, as money sometimes flees even from us today when we do not consider its value or make proper investments or feel we have to keep up with the Joneses. But suddenly the money was gone and friends were gone. Suddenly he was hungry too. And so he thought of value last. What really was valuable? Moral value, spiritual values, physical value. And he returned to his father's house. He came to himself. And then there's that story too of the bad woman, so declared even today. If you recall, Jesus was having dinner with the Pharisees. And suddenly, while they were eating, the door opened and here she was. And she came in with a box of ointment. She fell down at the feet of Jesus. She wanted to put ointment on his feet. And the Pharisees, what do you mean coming here? You are a sinner. You're a bad woman. Jesus stopped the Pharisee, you'll recall. Now, what happened? She was a woman who had already forgiven herself, but who with joy came to thank him for teaching him the real meaning of forgiveness. She was renewed. The old was gone. She had a new road to travel. She was no longer a bad woman. She was a good woman. And it's interesting. Jesus does not forgive the woman, but declares she is forgiven. Her state of mind, her ecstasy of love, showed that something had happened to her. And something compelled her to give thanks. Sometimes we take everything, but rarely do we give thanks. Isn't that true? Jesus understood this. Think back last Christmas, a woman told me, did you know I've given Christmas presents so many times? She said, you know I spent $35 giving this gift to this person? They didn't give me a thing. She says, never will I again even send a card. And that instant, I told her, I said, oh, yes, you will. You see, nothing greater can happen to a human being than to know he is forgiven and somebody else is forgiven too. Many of us who are worried, restless, fearful. Many of us who feel, oh, there's too many skeletons in my closet. Don't open the door. Lock it. We are unaware that we have an essential need to forgive others as well as ourselves and start anew. Now, what does forgiveness mean? Forgiveness means reconciliation in spite of estrangement. It means reunion in spite of hostility. It means acceptance of those who have been unacceptable to us. And it means a reception of those who are rejected. You see, forgiveness is unconditional, or it's not forgiveness at all. The great problem of humanity today is that we cannot transform the divine in spite of into a human because. In other words, if someone wrongs us, we say, well, I'll forgive him in spite of his wrong. Oh, but we must say, I forgive him because, although he is blinded to the truth, the Spirit of God is perfect within him, and I see that perfect. I love that Spirit. I bless that Spirit. You remember when Peter came to Jesus. He was having trouble, I guess, with someone. It might have been a neighbor. Might have been someone who owed him money. I don't know. And he said, look, I've forgiven him, Master, 7 times. Isn't that enough? No, I'm going to really let him have it. And Jesus said, no, that's not enough. And Peter took out the Talmud. And the Talmud said, forgive a person once, forgive them twice, forgive them 3 times, but the 4th time, out. Jesus smiled. He said, Peter, you're going to have to forgive 70 times 7. Now, that's a lot of time. Think of it the next time you quarrel about something. 70 times 7. Well, I trust Peter finally learned it. You see, Peter had been trying to forgive the person in spite of what he was doing. But Jesus knew he had to continue to forgive him until Peter knew there was a divine cause back of the forgiving act that would create a new effect in that person's life. And as the new effect appeared in that person's life, it would appear in Peter's life. There was a woman here, and I was saying, forgive somebody, and this woman had held this tremendous hatred against somebody who owed her money. And it was only a matter of a few $100s, but nevertheless, she'd think about it. Every day she'd think about it. And resentment grew deeper. And one Sunday I was thinking about this. I bless the person who owes you money, they'll pay you. She didn't like that idea at first, but she wanted the money, so she started in. Well, I guess it took 70 times 7, I don't know, but finally, here the money came after years. It worked. See, throughout the ministry of Jesus, he endeavored to provide opportunities for people to belong, to contribute, to give. For he knew that life demands that we express life in one form or another. For instance, we all desire to contribute something to life. But when we're in a state where we find we're unable to do that which we plan to do, that which we wanted, perhaps it was a new position, a certain promotion we wanted, perhaps it was a new car or a house, perhaps it was to be elected to office. And it didn't happen, and we contributed in a negative way. We blamed somebody else. We blamed the time. And what happened? When we do this, we participate in the pain of self-accusation and self-rejection. A wife brought her husband to counsel with me some years ago. He had been in public office and lost the election. But while in office, he was a good man, a sincere man. He contributed very much. He couldn't understand it. So when he lost the election, he chose an opposite road and became very vindictive, hateful, resentful. He blamed not only others for not helping him more, the precinct workers, but he blamed himself. Why didn't he say something different? Why didn't he do this? Well, he was quite an intelligent man. And he listened to me when I told him, look what's going to happen to you if you continue thinking this way. So he saw the problem, especially when it was pointed out by someone besides his wife. And then he went the other way. But he went the wrong way again. He started performing an emotional labor of self-punishment. His conscience hurt him now. And he'd go around asking everyone for forgiveness. Please forgive me. They didn't even know what he'd done except lose the election. He said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't win. I'm sorry that I condemned you. And they said, what did I do? Well, I was blaming you for not working harder. He says, please forgive me. Well, we can really have trouble within ourselves. So many of us dislike ourselves anyway. There was a cartoon not long ago. A doctor was talking to this patient. The patient was across the desk. All the tests were in, and he was looking at all the tests, the complete report. He anxiously awaited his diagnosis. And he said, Madam, I'm very sorry, but you are allergic to yourself. That's your problem. I wonder if you're allergic to yourself. If you don't like yourself, why, you have an allergy to take care of. There's more than hives, too. So many of us have made a mistake. But let us not feel that we have to spend the rest of our life doing penance. For instance, let us say a man has done a real wrong, of which he has repented. Now, if you owe somebody money and you've given your word you'll pay it, you're in a position that you're not going to be free from guilt until you pay it. You might not be able to pay it now, but you can write or you can call that person and say, look, my word is still my bond. If you've said something wrong about someone else, and you found out later it was just gossip, it wasn't true, then call that person or write that person. Say, I am sorry, I was wrong. And by doing so, you're liberated. Now, in the case of a man who has done a real wrong in which he has repented, and to the limit of his power, he has made restitution. He was compelled to do some self-examining, wasn't he? He was compelled to ask for forgiveness as he made the restitution. However, let us say he's not through with it yet, because his guilt complex now gets out of control. The thought of his deed harasses him, nags him, torments him, and it fills his mind constantly with remorseful memory. Now, no good can come from such plus activity in the conscience. It ruins the life of the sufferer and brings unhappiness not only to himself, his family, and his friends. We have to open the door and take that skeleton out. Well, this Jesus knew. And his words to the thief on the cross are proof sufficient. See, in moral failure, self-blame can become intolerable. I have seen it cause ulcers of the stomach. And I presume many other diseases. Although they started in a psychosomatic nature, they became real chronic problems. See, there are times when, as Huckleberry Finn said, conscience takes up more room than all the rest of a person's inside. It's true. And when this happens, condemnations evade the very soul and control the soul. But yet, it's interesting that self-blame, honestly faced and accepted, is one of the personality's most necessary functions. After years of work with college students, Dean Robert Wicks of Princeton said that whenever a boy has come about faith and settled down to a worthwhile life, the boy always has traced the change back to some experience that made him ashamed of himself. That is, in other words, we trace it back to something that we're ashamed of. But then he added, but which at the same time liberated the boy. He saw the experience. It was shameful. But he knew it need not be repeated. Actually, the feeling of guilt, is one of the great protections. If we do something wrong and feel guilty about it, we do not repeat it again. In fact, we might say it is one of the great protections we have against each other. If I feel guilty, I don't feel well, and I just have to tell you so, and we have to make up. When Jesus told the paralyzed man that his sins were forgiven, the man immediately stood up and walked into his house. And I might say that in hundreds of personal experiences with people in offices, their homes, hospitals, I have found that those who had a deep embedded guilt complex, even though it was unconscious, discussing the situation, suddenly a light was turned on and they told me about it. And when they released it, I said, all right, it's over with. Your sins are forgiven too. Let's feel better. Color would come to their face. The body chemistry instantly changed. They were young again. They're ready to leave the hospital very quickly. Many people believe in forgiveness in the way that is in complete contradiction to the teaching of Jesus. Many of us think of forgiveness as a solemn act of pardon or a release from punishment. Genuine forgiveness is participation. It's a reunion with something within ourselves which overcomes the power of separation, the power of an estrangement. And only because this is so does forgiveness make real love possible. See, we cannot love unless we have accepted forgiveness. And the deeper our experience of forgiveness is, the greater is our love. Now, there's not one of us here this morning who does not want to be greatly accepted in the society in which you live, or by our family, our friends, or where we work. This is an inner urge in all of us. We want to be accepted. We want to be respected. We want to be loved. By the same token, we desire to be accepted by life itself, to be an expression of happiness and goodness. Don't you like to be around somebody that's happy and secure, optimistic, that tells you in the midst of your problem, this too shall pass, come, I'll help you, I care? Certainly. But he who is accepted ultimately must also accept himself. For being forgiven and being able to accept ourselves, this is one and the same thing. This is oneness. For instance, we cannot accept ourselves as long as we feel guilty, unclean, separated. But the acceptance I speak of is of that which is divine within us. There's something beautiful within each and every one. The same was true of the thief on the cross. Years ago, I spoke to a woman who was not only ill, but very destitute. And I would say she was 55, 57, maybe 58. And her conversation was so negative. Certainly she'd had difficulties. We've all had difficulties. But when she told me there isn't anything to live for, I want out. How many times have you said, oh, I wish I could just die? This was her attitude. Certainly she had misgivings. She had misgivings that just stood out in her face. Every word. Misgivings against her family. Misgivings of her childhood. A hatred, a deep hatred for a husband who had divorced her. But now I knew this woman, through the law of love, through the law of forgiveness, if she could accept herself, forgive herself and others, had untold happiness and possibilities ahead. What they were, I did not know, because she asked me, I said, I don't know what they are, but they'll happen. But you have to confront yourself. Why do you want to live with all this misery? I said, how you can even eat, I don't know. I doubt if you sleep well. Well, I told her she had to accept herself for what she was, and that she had a power within her, and a beauty within her, a love within her, and a faith within her that she could use. But she had to forgive herself for holding all these terrible thoughts against her family and against the man who had divorced her, against life, actually against God. I said, forgive the past and let go of it. Let this be a new moment. Become one with an ultimate acceptance, a real acceptance, not make-believe. Well, you know that night, or that day, she truly confronted herself for the first time. She looked back. She was a part of it all, too. It takes two to do something, you know. My, what a change took place. She made no excuses now. But she did forgive herself, others completely. The following week now, she was afforded the opportunity to become a traveling companion to a very wealthy woman for a trip around the world. It happened easily and perfectly because now she had a personality. You wanted to be with her. Instantly. You liked her. They returned after an 8-month journey to Chicago. She remained with this companion there until a greater opportunity was provided to another member of the family who liked her, trusted her, had faith in her. You know, since that time, she's married. A real love, too. And she writes me that she is authoring a book of her life. And you know what the book is about? It is what happened when at last she accepted and forgave herself. What happened? The miracle of it all. She said, my life is now a miracle. Why can't other people do it? Well, they can. So she's writing this book of what happened to her. She's telling how she forgave others and really forgave, blessed, and loved them, loved something within herself, and decided to let this something express itself through love, laughter, joy. Well, this is what Jesus was talking about. This was a life more abundant. And he said, this can happen to any of us. But he knew it is the great necessity to do this if we're ever going to find peace of mind. The law of cause and effect is so vital and so certain. We can't afford to cast a stone against ourselves or to another. What stones are you casting against yourself? If you don't like yourself, you really are allergic to yourself, that no one cares for you, that life isn't good, life is wonderful. Are you casting stones against your neighbor, even our nation? This is the greatest nation on earth. Let's say something good about it instead of always saying something bad about it. Take a different attitude. You see, when we cast stones, we separate ourselves from the truth that sets us free, and we do it by ourselves. You know, I'm so interested in this record company. They're in Chicago. And they make records, like say there's a quartet and you're a tenor. You can buy a record with a tenor part missing for singing Let Me Call You Sweetheart, let's say. And you play it and you sing the tenor part and you join the quartet. Or if you play some other instrument, why, you can play with the symphony orchestra. That part's missing. They call the name of the company Music Minus One. I think it's interesting, but it's great. Well, I could not help but think that many of us look at life minus one, ourselves. We look at love minus one. We're not loving. We look at success minus one. We're a failure. We look at opportunity. It couldn't happen to me. Opportunity minus one. I've never had any opportunity. Oh, forgive yourself for such statements. We were created to express talent, enthusiasm, and love. Every one of us here is beautiful inside. Every one of us is needed. But are we plus or minus? Are we living or are we just existing? Are we accepting or are we rejecting? When Jesus told the woman, "You certainly are forgiven," he recognized that she had first forgiven herself. She experienced that great moment of which there is no greater. The moment when she reunited herself with herself. Like the prodigal out there, you come home to something within. Why, I didn't know this faith make me whole. I didn't know my word could affect every organ and cell of my body. I didn't know that I could speak my word and prosper my neighbor. And I didn't know that I could have joy as he prospered. I didn't know that I could speak a word to this world that's so in need of the affirmative word of love. I didn't know I could speak it. And to some extent there would be an action. Let us know it takes a decisive spiritual experience to break through the clouds of ignorance and erratic human behavior. But it can be done. Just takes a little self-examination. Takes a little self-confronting just confidentially with yourself. Write it out. This I must forgive myself for and tear it up. And if there's others, write it down. Tear it up. Make restitution if restitution is needed. But oh, what a joy you'll have. You see, this can be done. And it begins when we can accept ourselves for what we are. Children of the Most High, one God, one living Spirit within us all. Knowing that when we forgive ourselves and others, and really do it, we perhaps for the first time are speaking the language of God, our Father. Oh, how grateful we are. To have the opportunity at last to discover ourselves, to know why things are going wrong and correct them. To know that thy wisdom, thy love is available to direct us, to heal us, to make clear our path. So right now, may each and every one of us enter into that consciousness of self-examination. If we'll do it honestly, we will make the greatest self-discovery we have ever made. Where we are, God is. All the Father hath is ours. for this privilege, for this opportunity, we do give thanks. And so it is.